Well, we woke up with some great news from Canada and Mexico today. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said something that should have been front page news in every Canadian outlet, but you probably never saw it.
Canada and Mexico have formed a united front going into the July 1st CUSMA talks. One coordinated position, one shared message to Washington. Mexican President Sheinbaum confirmed that the two governments have been building that position through direct communication. So Washington is no longer dealing with two countries that are guessing what the other one has been told, which, Dave, strengthens both their positions.
Yeah, for the past 18 months, Washington's play on CUSMA has been simple. Keep Canada and Mexico apart. Negotiate with each one of them separately and let the uncertainty do the damage. It's a classic move, and for a while, it was working. Well, until it wasn't.
So today, we're going to break down exactly how this united front was built, why it works, and what it means for July 1st.
Okay, so let's make sure that everyone is up to speed. A lot of people are treating July 1st like a cliff. It's not.
Right. CUSMA has a mandatory 6-year review built right into the deal. July 1st, 2026 is that review. It's a checkpoint. Canada's chief negotiator, Janice Charette, actually used that exact wording. She called it a checkpoint rather than a cliff. The deal does not disappear if the three countries can't agree on an extension.
No, if all three agree, then CUSMA extends automatically for 16 years, all the way to 2042. If they don't reach an agreement, the deal rolls into annual reviews until its expiry in 2036. Now, the deal stays in place no matter what happens. What changes is the level of uncertainty.
Yeah, and Washington has been using that uncertainty like a pressure point. Trump's trade representative, Jamieson Greer, has floated something even more aggressive, scrapping the trilateral deal entirely and replacing it with two separate bilateral agreements.
Canada, U.S. on one side, Mexico, U.S. on the other. Completely separate, which basically means Washington negotiates each country in isolation. There's no coordination between Canada and Mexico, no shared position. The classic divide and pressure.
But here's the thing. That strategy has a single point of failure. It only works if Canada and Mexico don't talk to each other. The moment they compare notes, the moment they walk in together with a common position, well, the entire premise collapses.
Which is exactly what just happened.
So here's something that most Canadians really don't know. Canada and Mexico's trade relationship with each other, not with the U.S., but with each other, hit more than $62 billion in 2025.
And that number has grown 12 times since NAFTA began. Mexico is now Canada's third largest individual trading partner, behind the U.S. and China. It's not a marginal relationship, people. That is a major economic partnership.
And it didn't happen by accident. Back in February of this year, a Canadian trade delegation went to Mexico City. This wasn't just a courtesy visit either. Dominic LeBlanc led over 370 delegates from more than 240 Canadian organizations right down to Mexico. Now that is a serious commitment.
And out of that came a joint Canada-Mexico bilateral action plan covering trade, security, energy, and investment through 2028. These two countries are no longer treating their own relationship as a side conversation filtered through Washington. They're building it directly between each other.
And on top of that, both Canada and Mexico are members of the CPTPP. That's the Pacific Trade Agreement covering 11 countries. So both already have a shared set of trade rules that exists independently of anything Washington decides to do. So we both have somewhere else to go.
Which is what is really important here. When Washington threatens CUSMA, it only works if Canada and Mexico have no alternatives. When both countries are expanding their trade relationships in Asia, in Europe, and with each other, that threat loses weight. The leverage equation shifts.
Not completely, because the U.S. still has the largest economy on the continent, but it shifts enough that the old divide and pressure move becomes a lot harder to run.
So let's dig into that strategy a little bit more. What does a united Canada-Mexico front actually do in the negotiating room?
Okay, Washington's preferred approach, and this is right out of Greer's own public statements, is maximum flexibility. Separate deals let Washington demand one set of concessions from Mexico and a different set from Canada. And then they reward whichever country accepts the term first. I call that a race to the bottom.
Yep, it sure is. And neither country benefits from winning that race. Both end up worse. Canada and Mexico have figured out that neither country benefits from winning a slightly better seat aboard a ship Washington is already there drilling holes into.
But if they stick together, as Sheinbaum is saying, then together the picture is very different.
Yeah, you have two coordinated partners, a $62 billion bilateral trade base, shared CPTPP membership, growing European and Pacific partnerships, and a common position on what they will and won't accept.
And Sheinbaum confirming this publicly, by name, on the record, that's not nothing. That is a signal to the markets, to the investors, to Washington. The United Front isn't just in the room. It's being stated openly, which means Canada and Mexico can point to it as leverage before the talks even formally begin.
And there's also the supply chain argument, right? North American manufacturing doesn't stop at the border. Parts, materials, finished products, they all move among all three countries, sometimes more than once before reaching the customer. A component made in Ontario, assembled in Michigan, and finished in Guadalajara.
So if Washington changes the rules of origin, adds border costs, or imposes new tariffs, the bill doesn't stay in Canada or Mexico. American manufacturers pay more for components. American exporters face retaliation. American consumers see higher prices, and the disruption, it flows right back.
Yeah, which is one more reason why using CUSMA as a weapon has real limits and is going to end up backfiring on the U.S.
So what should we all expect by July 1st? Well, that is the defining moment. Reuters has already reported that actual revisions are not expected to be negotiated by that date, and July 1st begins a process. It doesn't finish one.
No, because both Canada and Mexico have formally requested a 16-year extension. Washington, they haven't committed to anything. And Trump has actually said he doesn't even want to renew it. He's called the agreement irrelevant. He's created so much uncertainty as he possibly can, short of actually withdrawing. He doesn't even know where he sits on this.
Or I wonder which markets he's trying to manipulate next. Which, by the way, withdrawing requires 6 months' notice. So withdrawal is not a snap decision either. And that gives Canada and Mexico time to prepare regardless of what Trump chooses.
There's a real risk that Washington deliberately drags this out. Annual reviews keep Canada and Mexico uncertain, and uncertainty gives the U.S. repeated opportunities to demand concessions.
But hey, that tactic, it cuts both ways. Every year without certainty encourages Canadian and Mexican companies to invest in alternatives. They will build new supply chains, deepen Pacific and European relationships, and Washington could discover that using uncertainty as a leverage slowly weakens the very economic system it wants to control.
And it gives Canada and Mexico the opportunity to kick this down the road and negotiate with a more sane U.S. administration.
So basically, as usual, Trump's threat backfires.
So what this means to me is that Canada and Mexico have stopped competing to be the least punished country. That's the shift here. For years, both nations treated the U.S. relationship as the only relationship that mattered, and that worked at the time. And Washington, what they've done is they've used that dependency every single time.
Well, now Canada and Mexico are comparing notes, and they're walking toward the table together with the same request: a growing bilateral relationship and a shared interest in stopping Washington from breaking North America into two weaker negotiations.
Sheinbaum had just made it public and made it clear. The common front, it's confirmed. And Carney's government has backed it with real action. 370 delegates, a bilateral action plan, active CPTPP coordination.
So look, Canada and Mexico working together, it will not suddenly make them more powerful than the United States. The U.S. still holds powerful cards. It has the largest market, the largest economy, and enormous influence over investment. But we're starting to narrow the gap, and that matters.
Yeah, it makes bullying less efficient. It makes cooperation more attractive. And it means Washington has to consider the possibility that pressure could permanently redirect Canadian and Mexican investment, which is the last thing a president trying to rebuild North American manufacturing actually wants.
So the question is whether Washington recognizes that, or whether Trump keeps threatening the agreement he once called his own greatest achievement. And in doing so, that pushes Canada and Mexico even closer together.
All right, time for you guys to weigh in here. We want to know from you. By the end of 2026, does CUSMA get extended 16 years, or does Trump drag it into annual reviews and keep the pressure on?
And the bigger question is, can Prime Minister Carney and President Sheinbaum hold this common front together through a full round of hard negotiations? Or does Washington find a crack?
Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think, and whether you think the United Canada-Mexico front is the real shift here, or is Washington still holding the stronger hand?
So hit the like button if you found this useful, give us a hype, and share it with somebody who needs to see this, because it genuinely helps the channel reach more people.
And don't forget to check out the pinned comment down below for the merch store, the Substack, where we're getting spicy over there, and the link to our private Facebook group.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we shall see you tomorrow.
Ciao for now.